With the November 4 elections less than 2 months away, it's a great time to ask my fellow Capitol reporters to talk about those elections. So, to my left, Scott Bauer of the Associated Press, Jason Stein of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Mary Spicuzza of the Wisconsin State Journal, J.R. Ross of WisPolitics.com, and Bob Hague of the Wisconsin Radio Network. Let's start off this way. The governor, you can argue with John Doe drip and drab of documents, maybe hasn't had the best 2 weeks, but was he helped today by this week by Wednesday's over-the-top comments by the Democratic chairwoman? That enabled him to play some offense and raise some money. Let's Mary?
I think it did help him change the discussion. You know, here you have somebody who made comments about giving women the back of his hand that Mary Burke tried to distance herself from, but yes. Republicans were really able to leap on that, send out fundraising letters, talk about, just shift the discussion, and I think that did help him because he was kind of getting beaten up with John Doe and jobs numbers and things like that.
Wasserman has a reputation of being outspoken, but were you surprised when she had to walk that back?
No, I mean, party chairs, their job is to be outrageous, to make your candidate look sane by comparison. That's what they do. But she still crossed a line. Even Democrats will tell you it was a stupid comment. There's kind of a nuanced thing going on here, people I've talked to, that Walker, he talks about the enthusiasm problem he has and the base not being cited, the kind of, we call it canned outrage in this business, where it's a constant churn of press releases. It's not really about the average voter, it's about the base saying, look, these people are attacking your governor, you need to rally around the flag and kind of get back on in the game. And so there's a little bit of that going on here too, where it's pushing people, come on, get excited, we need you come November, it's 2 months to go. And you talk to operatives, they tell you that, they're, anecdotally at least, that conservatives are kind of dispirited. I mean, they're not dispirited, but they've been beat up. It's been 2-3 long years of elections. They want a break. They need to rally again for November if they want to win, and that's part of what's going on.
Any other PSs on the Wasserman comment?
Just one thing. I mean, the challenge in campaigns, there's always the things you control and the things you don't. And that was a good thing for Walker to have that pop up for him. The other side of it is, as you had day 2 roll out, you had the 7th Circuit in Chicago release this gay marriage decision that sort of trampled on other stories of the day a little bit. And that's one thing that I've noticed in this campaign. It seems like every time Walker has a little bit of momentum or just something that gives him forward propulsion, something else comes along and kind of derails it a little bit or lessens it. So I just was struck by that happening again yesterday.
Okay. I'm struck by 3 straight months in a row, Charles Franklin has had to come up with new ways to say dead heat. And, well, if this is going to stay like this, does this mean it's going to be a ground game, a turnout to vote? Scott, what do you think?
I think it's always a ground game. You know, it's always a turnout to vote. Who's going to get their people to the polls, especially in an off non-presidential year, right. Which historically would favor Republicans in Wisconsin. But you know, I think that gets back to the enthusiasm gap we were talking about, that Marquette poll showed, and that Walker's acknowledged and kind of talked publicly about, which is a little bit surprising, that he's come out and said, you know, we need to get our people excited. And you know, whether you believe the Marquette poll, whether you believe that Walker may be slightly ahead, I think anybody who's paying close attention to this race would tell you that they expected it to be close. They expected the numbers to be what they are, and you know, ultimately, it likely could, barring some other factor, it likely will come down to who can get their people out on the 4th.
Bob, are you intrigued as I am by likely voters? One person leads, registered voters, the other person leads on those Franklin polls.
I honestly, I don't know what to make of that. We're really parsing a fine line here with that sort of division. But I wanted to get back with what Scott said about nobody's surprised. Well, least of all Governor Walker, because at every appearance he's made for months now, he has reiterated how close this is going to be. And I guess I'll just say I was surprised to hear him earlier this week last week talk about the lack of enthusiasm among his supporters. But again, the likely voters, the registered voters, wow.
Well, what's unusual is in Wisconsin we have more Democrats than Republicans. So normally the registered voter pool should favor Democrat, and you're seeing the opposite. So why is that? That's unusual. And you're also seeing that Burke has had this gradual increase in her numbers in the Marquette poll. What Walker has been, every poll since March or January at 46 or 48, right? So what does that mean? Does that mean he has hit a ceiling and that she has room to grow? Or is there the people in the middle haven't made up their minds? Will they not turn out? Will they make up their minds ever and do something? I mean, what's going to happen with those people in the middle? It's always been about a turnout game, but this might be a true base-on-base election. And if Democrats are excited, which that poll suggests, that means trouble for them.
I think this is a great time to ask 5 Capitol reporters how different are the candidates and how accessible they are. Now, every time Governor Walker holds a public event, he will afterwards take questions, right? But how does Burke work it? Will she take questions after her public events? Can we contrast the styles there?
I'm trying to think back to the last public event that Mary Burke had here in Madison that I was able to attend. It was a while ago. But yeah, she took questions. I know several of us were there.
But it doesn't happen as often as
well,
Governor Walker, right, Bob?
It does not. It doesn't happen here as often as Governor Walker. I can't really speak to whether or not she's taking questions when she's doing events with media elsewhere around the state.
She might feel like she kind of has much of the Madison vote already and needs to get out to the rest of the state.
I mean, it seems like our paper has been more often getting her in one-on-one phone interviews and Walker more in press gaggles after events. I wouldn't say that we've had trouble putting questions to either candidate that we need to put to them.
When the governor holds a gaggle after an event, does it usually last 4 to 5 minutes? Does he take all the questions, or how many until the aide says, "Thank you, that's all"?
I think he would be happy to stand there and take questions until the last person standing was done. You know, I think typically the aides try to cut it off after 4 or 5 minutes, but frequently he will stand there and continue to take questions even after they've said it's over. I don't think he's ever, you know, there are isolated cases where he's been less willing to talk, but he, you know, is by far one of the most accessible governors I've ever covered.
And I mean, obviously, there is this ongoing criminal investigation, which. And, you know, at times you'll have 1,300 pages of documents that'll drop. Nobody knows what's in them or what they say or what he might get asked about. So obviously that's going to make any governor or, you know, any elected official or candidate a little less likely to, you know, to make themselves available. I mean, it's just a reality.
Well, 2 follow-up questions on that, Jason. And number one, how many more John Doe document dumps do you anticipate between now and November 4? Is there any way to know? And number 2, with the July Franklin poll saying 40 to 50% shrug it off as just politics, how badly has the governor's campaign been damaged by the John Doe document dumps, and if so, how badly?
I would like to meet the voter who up till now has been a staunch Scott Walker supporter. Because there's no mere lukewarm. Nobody is lukewarm about this governor. So has that hurt his campaign? I don't think it has. I can't imagine a prospective Scott Walker voter saying, "Well, I was with him up until now, but this, you know, this is where I draw the line." Because, and yes, the campaign has gotten out in front of it by saying it's politics.
Are any of the 5 or 6 or 7% of the undecideds, are they interested in the John Doe stuff, and are they just not tuned in yet?
I mean,
the Marquette poll, it seems like from what they're seeing in the polls, it seems like the independents and undecideds are far more affected by feeling like Wisconsin is lagging other states in terms of job growth. The John Doe, I mean, I think it could sway some people who aren't following along, but I just don't know that the average voter who's undecided, who doesn't follow the news too much, can even keep up with all of these different document dumps and what they mean. And, you know, it's almost hard enough for reporters to keep up with the pages and pages of documents, much less a casual observer.
I mean,
JR, you were going to say?
Well, I find it interesting reading national stories about the governor's race talking about the John Doe being this potent issue against Walker. When I talk to operatives here, they'll talk about, no, it's jobs. You know, I mean, the Doe issue, again, speaks to the bases. If you hate Governor Walker, it inflames how much you hate him. If you love him, you think he's being persecuted. So it excites the bases. But the jobs issue is the biggest thing that I hear about. What Mary's talking about with that penetration, if you will, the Mary Burke message of we're lagging, that's a trouble spot for Walker, and that's why you've seen in the last 3 weeks go on TV talk about jobs. We're number 3 now, according to numbers that he's using that he used to say were not very good. 100,000 jobs gained. Latest ad talks about these various spots that have added jobs. That's what he's trying to combat. He has to push back on that message hard. If that takes hold, that's more trouble for him in that regard.
And that's a message that it's a lot easier for voters to wrap their heads around than John Doe. I mean,
good point. What do you expect? Now, the governor last week said, I'm going to start laying out my agenda if I'm reelected for a second term. Do you look for anything major and surprising, or is this just what a governor who's in a very tight race says? Scott, what do you think?
I think we'll hear a lot of talk about cutting taxes in the second term. I think we'll hear a lot of talk about the taxes that have been cut, the roughly $2 billion in taxes that have been cut.
The one that may have forced us into a
we won't hear about
deficit?
that.
No, we won't hear about that.
We won't hear about that.
Excuse
but,
me.
I think that'll be a point for him to draw a contrast with Mary Burke. And, you know, he continues to talk about how she was part of the Jim Doyle administration. And I think we'll hear a lot of contrast with that, her record on the school board and what Walker's done to cut taxes. He hasn't really focused on that, at least in the TV ad campaign, but you can guarantee that's coming.
Do you think there'll be any major new theme announced and when he lays out a second term, Jason, agenda?
I was, you know, 2 or 3 weeks ago I would have said no. In the recall election in 2012 and this year he's been very focused on explaining to voters what he's already done and selling his candidacy in terms of, well, here are my achievements. But the race is tight. It appeared that maybe he moved in a different direction in terms of talking about his agenda. Certainly some of his supporters were asking for that. He says he was going to do it all along. I guess we'll see.
Okay.
Some Republicans have been asking for a while, like, what else is there to do? I mean, if you think about it, Governor Walker got a lot done the first 3 months he was governor. I mean, big part of his agenda. It came back with majority again, being this term, and cut taxes. I mean, what else is there to do to spur the economy in Wisconsin?
But if he's going to be a presidential candidate, he's got to have Act 2, the next signature defining
Well, that's
change.
the thing. I mean, so we've created 100,000 jobs in Wisconsin. Rick Perry, 100,000 jobs, big deal. You know, I mean, what's Walker's argument nationally? Well, he took on the unions, great, but that was now 3 years ago. There are other people who have done stuff since then. What has he done since then? What's been his shining accomplishment? Well, he's cut taxes. Well, we're still high tax compared to Texas. Other states are going to be in play, or they'll have governors running for president. So what's going to be as a shining achievement, if you will, other than if he wins re-election this fall, be able to say, look, I can win in a blue state or a purple state, even holding true to my conservative credentials.
Well, just a footnote, when our tax collections fell $281 million at the end of fiscal 2014, it doesn't give him as much money to play with in terms of tax reform. Just a couple more notes before we turn to another, before we go to the Attorney General's race. Can you remember a gubernatorial election where the differences are as pronounced in this one? It just strikes me. They differ on vouchers, MA, photo ID, collective bargaining, same-sex marriage, and job progress. I think it seems to me unusual.
Well, I don't remember Jim Doyle and Mark Green being buddies ideologically, or Tom Barrett and Scott. Well, I mean, they're all sharp contrasts a lot of times. So
well, but that also speaks, as JR just said, to how much Walker has accomplished for Burke to tilt at. I mean, it's a target-rich environment for her to differentiate herself from Walker and the Republicans.
You know, the parties are starkly different now, and so I think it's just inevitable that their nominees are going to reflect that.
Okay, last question on this, on the gov race. Do you think Obama will come back now that he's been invited by Mary Burke? And I think Hillary Rodham Clinton comes in to help Burke. Just any PSs on that?
I can see that.
Obama comes to Madison, you know, sometime a week to 10 days out from the election.
maybe Milwaukee. You know, she needs turnout in this. I mean, she needs a goose turnout, and the key for any Democrat is goose turnout in Madison, Milwaukee. Serve in Brown County, not get blown out there, and do okay the rest of the state. So she needs a big turnout in the big cities.
Let's turn to the race for Attorney General. The freshest face is Susan Happs. She informed me yesterday during our interview that she won every county, which she's okay. That was surprising. But here's what intrigues me. When I went back to the August Franklin poll, both Happ and Schimmel, 80% of those responding either said haven't got enough information or don't know. Who wins this race and why, when the unknowns are that big?
Well, everything I've heard is that you got the first taste of what the race is going to be like this week with the report about the land deal she had. Her husband had with a guy who had this plea deal and this case, et cetera, et cetera. Very damaging for her for the first kind of out of the gate story. But what this race will boil down to is they both are prosecutors. They both have careers. They both handle cases that didn't look the best because of plea deals they struck. Which side can get the best ads and make the other person look the worst and run them for 3 to 4 weeks and try and grab some attention from this governor's race? Because the governor's race will suck most of the oxygen out of the room. So it's about kind of either are the coattails at the top of the ticket, or can you kind of differentiate yourself? And then two, will voters, these mythical, undecideds, will they at some point go, I'm going to stick with candidate A for governor, but to be sure, I'm going to kind of vote for the other party for AG to have a check, if you will. Yeah. That's still a theory. I'm not sure if it's going to hold out because they're so partisan and polarized anymore. But
well, that's one of my questions. Can you see that happening? I'm going to vote for Walker, but I want a Democrat to be the Attorney General. Go back to the Tommy Doyle era. Thanks for mentioning it, JR. Any thoughts on that?
You hear that theory a lot. I don't know if I buy into that. I mean, I guess we can wait and see, but yeah, I think the same people that talk a lot about that theory are the same people who talk about Republican voters voting in the Democratic primary to try to influence. I mean, clearly sometimes that happens, but I don't know. I mean, Hap is, like you said, she's new on the scene. The Franklin poll had her up, 10, I think?
10%. First of all, 80% say don't have enough information or don't know them, both of them, and yet she's up 10% in the Franklin poll.
But she ran TV ads in the primary. Schimmel had no primary, has not run anything on TV. That obviously is going to change, but clearly people are focused on the governor's race at this point.
If there are no new revelations, big revelations about either candidate, I would be surprised if the vote totals are very different in the governor's and the AG's race. People have become so partisan in terms of their voting patterns that I don't see them splitting tickets a lot.
But are they polarized in terms of top of the ticket and the gov, and not so polarized at the next level down?
I think
Attorney
it's dog
General?
Catcher, president,
all the way down, up and down the ticket.
I think they're pretty polarized. Especially you've seen the Attorney General coming up in the gay marriage case and all of these cases where people see that the top cop is political.
But let's not forget, Walker won the recall, and 5 months later, Tammy Baldwin won the Senate race. So not on the same ballot, but
well, that's what I know. Is who are these Obama Walker voters? Where are they? How does that work? The governor talked though a little bit last week about there are people who voted for her in the recall who just opposed the recall. Maybe those are the Obama Walker voters. I don't know. But it would be fascinating to find one of these people and be like, well, okay, what are you thinking?
It was funny trying to find them, and I actually found one in Fort Atkinson. She was running her son's shop, and it was hilarious because she had voted for Obama and Walker, planned to vote for Walker in the recall because she didn't feel like what he had done was serious enough to be recalled. And I was like, I found you! And then she's like, oh, I don't want my name in the paper. People are going to kill me. She felt like both sides were going to be after her.
She's afraid her store would go down.
Yeah, and then people would both sides would boycott her son's store or something, you know what I mean? They're getting it from both sides.
I found too, when you talk to voters and you ask them, do you consider yourself a Democrat or Republican? I consider myself an independent. I consider myself undecided. Then you talk to them, they're truly not undecided or truly not independent.
Right.
Yeah, it's very rare.
The latest Franklin poll, 37% still claim to be independent. Mary, I want to ask you, is there a gender issue here with Mary Burke and Susan Happ? Is there any momentum that they can score with for two women running for the top spots?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think that we saw in the primary a lot of voters turned out and supported Democratic women. They've been talking about the Republican war on women, which Republicans disagree with, obviously, but there is momentum, I think, around women's issues, around glass ceilings, around, you have abortion rights coming up, you have a lot of women support same-sex marriage. So I do think, I think that they can ride that momentum. We'll see about the general election. But
if you look at the polling, there's a lopsided, among men, there's a lopsided support for Walker, but what was not true in the past is in the recall, things were pretty closely divided in terms of women's vote for Scott Walker or his opponent Tom Barrett. This time, women are also lopsided, but this time for Burke. So Walker really needs to narrow that gap if he wants to repeat.
Okay.
Yeah, there's also a gender gap in men too in favor of Walker that
Yes.
Burke has to address. So there's that question. The biggest thing I've heard is that Burke and Hap are the better vehicles to deliver the war on women message. I mean, they kind of embody it, right? So it helps make it easier to make. Now, is that going to drive the election? No, I think it's still going to be jobs. That's all I hear about is that how do you feel about your pocketbook, your job, your house, your mortgage, your kids' school? Those are still the driving factors in elections. But those people who might be undecided or that might kind of tilt in one way or another.
Let's turn to the 6th Congressional District. Senator Grothman is the Republican nominee, and there's decades of Capitol press room experience here. This is the Senator Grothman who would walk in and say, anybody need a quote? This is, anybody need a quote? Anybody need a quote? Outspoken, just not afraid to say anything. Will we see a new Glenn Grothman in the next 60 days? Can he stop himself from being the Glenn Grothman that we've covered for decades? Bob?
Well, why would he? No.
And you're saying that because it's worked for him.
It worked.
He's
for
a
him.
Republican nominee
Right.
in the 6th CD.
No, he's not going to put the brakes on, and he's already, I think, probably thinking about what his first introductory remarks are going to be to Speaker Boehner.
Well, he's done it for since March or April. I mean, he's been very disciplined. I mean, give him credit. There have been a couple things that are like, maybe a little sketchy, the joke about like the war on men, stuff like that. But he's been pretty good discipline, message-wise, being disciplined. He's favored in that race right now because of the nature of the district. Now he's going to debate Mark Harris, I think, the 15th or something like that.
Okay.
So they got one down, but he's been okay so far. And quite frankly, he won that primary because he was Glenn Grothman, because he was outspoken. He will tell you that people in the primary voters liked him because he said, "I will take on Washington." So that was his shtick.
The other side of it is too that he's in a majority Republican congressional district.
Right.
So if he's in a 50-50 district, sure. I mean those past comments could be very damaging, but that is not the district he's in. So I think Mark Harris still has a pretty uphill battle.
But you don't see then, Jason, your answer implies that Washington Democrats are not going to see an opening and pour more resources and money into Mark Harris because he's running against Senator Grothman.
I mean, we'll see. I mean, I wouldn't want to make a prediction on that, but whether they do or they don't, it doesn't. They can't change the composition of the voter. They can't change who the voters are in that congressional district. They can change who turns out to vote, but I don't know if they can change that enough.
I don't know that Washington Democrats are looking to dump a ton of money in the race. I do think they're watching that race very closely to hear what Senator Grothman says, and if he says anything, if he has some kind of Todd Akin moment, I think they will pounce on that and try to do a lot of fundraising and try to get voters riled up. But it's almost like they're waiting for Grothman to put his foot in his mouth and screw it up.
And Harris has this horrible problem where he has to raise money to prove he's viable.
Yes.
Well, he can't report any fundraising numbers until October. Then it's too late. And no outside group will come in unless they know he's viable. So it might be a case where 2016 is a better year to go after, assuming Grothman wins. To wait for 2016, Democratic turnout is up. You might have 2 years of Glenn Grothman fodder and then go after him then. But right now, you can't say that races look competitive unless Harris can do something really amazing the next month or so.
Harris is not very high profile. He had a private business career, and then he got into the Winnebago County exec, but he's not cut a very high profile in state politics. And I don't think he gave a super good speech to the state Democratic Convention. Any PSs on the 6th CD?
Petri, we caught him after that Obie thing this week. Didn't really give an enthusiastic endorsement of Glenn Grothman as a successor. So,
I saw that in your column, JR. It was not a ringing endorsement.
No, didn't back Mark Harris either, but just kind of called Grothman able.
Able. Able. And with that, let's turn to the legislature. It's Assembly Speaker Voss is saying we're coming back 58, 59, maybe even 60, maybe even 61. But let's focus on the state Senate. How do you see some of these key districts that the Dems have got to win to take it? The Ellis seat, the Schultz seat, the Libum seat, winnable?
Well, the 17th should be their best one, and it's a nightmare
That's
right now
Schultz.
for them because, one, you had this family feud going on where Whitwer got out early, and the Dems and Madison weren't happy with him, so then Hague jumped over from the Assembly race to the Senate race. Yeah. So then you've got that feud. Kathleen Feinhout backed Ernie Whitwer. I think a couple other members of the caucus gave him money as kind of like a little elbow to Chris Larson.
Cullen wrote him a check.
So you've got that going on. So then Whitwer wins on the election night and then on the canvas, but now this recount happens. There are lost ballots.
Family feud.
Which just creates the whole, the bases both think that's a conspiracy. Somebody's trying to take my candidate down. So now you have a potential of a lawsuit. I mean, it couldn't be playing out any better for Howard Marklein in that district right now.
Okay.
What is that, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory?
Snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. I was up doing a joint forum with the Roger Roth and Penny Bernard Shaber. I can't get a feel for that district. What are your thoughts on that? Anybody?
You got two good candidates. You've got a district.
Veterans of the Assembly. Roth is a veteran, but excuse me for interrupting, Jason.
Yeah, he's a veteran of the Assembly and a veteran in the military sense of the word. His uncle was a longtime congressman in the district. My impression of the district has been it leans Republican, but there's a good opportunity on both sides there. I mean, I think that's an old-fashioned campaign race.
Well, that race in the presidential race 2 years ago was split by 12 votes between Obama and Romney.
12?
12. Wow. It has gotten more Democratic than when I started. Before it was deep red. Nobody bothered to challenge Mike Ellis. So it's changed, but it's an off year. Republicans feel pretty good about Roger Roth right now. They think he's got a great name. He's going to raise good money. He's getting outside help. Dems like Penny Bernard Shaber. But what's the environment going to be like? And Scott Walker, he's been very good in the Fox Valley. If he drives a turn up there, it would help Roger. So, that might play into it as well. There might be some coattails from the governor's race.
And in the 9th Senate District, the Leibniz seat, is that overwhelmingly GOP, JR?
It's not like 60% GOP, but it's in the mid-50s in a normal election, like 53, 55. Martha Lanning has raised great money. She is an aggressive candidate. People talk highly about her. Devin LeMahieu hasn't exactly come across as the most gregarious candidate yet, but he's a Republican in a Republican seat.
And his dad served in the Assembly for 12 years.
In an off years. So Democrats feel very good, but Republicans will say no matter what that he just can't lose that seat because it should be theirs.
Why are we not hearing much about the Moulton and Petrowski seats? Are they not considered competitive?
Jerry Petrowski's district. It's an interesting district up there. It is as configured now a lot more Republican than it used to be, and the candidate, the Democratic candidate running against him, is interestingly Native American, and Paul Demain, thank you. That is also, I mean, that can be a real selling point with the Democrats up there and can help, I think, with enthusiasm. But again, the numbers, I think, are just in Petrowski's favor, the way the district is drawn up now.
Yeah, we're in a redistricted era where we're seeing a lot of seats that used to be competitive not so competitive anymore.
The Democrats will tell you that Petrowski is great at doing functions. He travels the district a lot, works it very hard. He was in the Assembly for 15, 20 years for the Senate. So it's also, if you look at the map of Wisconsin, there are only a couple of areas of the state that have trended Republican in recent years. I mean, like Waukesha has gotten deeper red, right? But areas that were Democratic or swing at one time have got more Republican. You're looking at Sheboygan and Wausau. The governor does well in Wausau that helps Petrowski. Over in Moulton seat, I mean, they found a guy who was a transportation advocate and a bus driver from Eau Claire to run in a swing seat. I mean, that's not really a high-profile candidate where you go, okay, great, there's a fundraising machine, if you will, that gives them a great shot. So the map is not looking that great for Democrats. Frank Lassay is kind of being, I'm hearing from Republicans just keep an eye on him because it's Frank. But right now, the path to majority is not really clear for Democrats. They've got some issues there.
I understand. We're almost out of time. Let's wrap it up this way. I want to ask each of you what one wild card factor or new issue will you be most closely following between now and November 4? Bob.
Other than the NL wild card?
Yeah, well, you were in Miller Park last night. Let's not go there.
I really couldn't come up with a good one on this. For me, it's still, I agree with what everybody has said in the governor's race. It's about jobs. I don't see any other issues really popping up between now and then in that race.
Okay. Jared?
I mean, if there's something damaging from the dough, that could be a wild card. But I mean, the way this lawsuit is set up, there's no way charges will come before November. So that kind of takes it off the table. The thing that I'm kind of watching, I'm curious about, is this enthusiasm gap or the perceived gap. I mean, if you think about it, we're talking about Republicans nationally doing very well. So why are we the one exception to the rule right now? Is that really going to hold for 2 more months? Maybe it will. Maybe Walker is so polarizing that we're the one exception to what's happening nationally. If that happens, that would be fascinating, because not only could it change the governor's race, but if you think about it, if you're a Democrat running for legislature, that helps you a great deal to have your base excited. Now, I've heard polling that suggests that while Walker is not doing great top of the ticket, in individual districts he's doing well, which suggests that the real enthusiasm for Mary Burke is in Milwaukee, Madison, urban areas. So that's one of the factors. But yeah, the enthusiasm gap, is it real, and will it persist?
Thank you. Mary?
These aren't really new issues, but I think a couple things that'll be coming up is we'll be getting another batch of quarterly federal jobs numbers shortly. Gosh, what, a little over a week, I think. And then the arguments in the John Doe case will be coming up, so that'll be interesting to hear and see if new revelations come out either on jobs and how Wisconsin is doing or John Doe.
Jason?
You know, just kind of piggybacking on what JR said, I think another way to gauge the enthusiasm, where the overall, partisan gaps are at, is just to look at how the president's doing in Wisconsin. He's not doing well nationally. He's doing just well enough in Wisconsin, I think, that he can, even though he's still underwater here in terms of his approval rating, he can at least come here in Democratic strongholds and be a help. Can he maintain that in Wisconsin, or does he sink further to the point where he can't even do that here?
Scott?
I'd say a couple wild cards are the debates that'll be coming up in October with Burke, and
will only be 2.
Only be 2 on the October 10th and 17th. Just because it'll be the only time people will see Burke and Walker together.
And those are both Friday nights, by the way.
Both Friday nights.
A lot of Wisconsinites are doing other things.
Well timed as usual. They could have maybe gotten it during a Packers game, to bolster the viewage. But I'm curious to see how Mary Burke does in that environment. Walker is obviously very well oiled when it comes to that type of thing. So there's that, and just to see, I think a lot of Democrats even who would never vote for Walker still don't know much about Mary Burke.
That's
and want to see how she does and what she says.
And what he just said is my thing to watch. If you watch those Franklin polls, you'll see that in July, 40% said didn't know enough or didn't know Mary Burke. The August one said 30. So I'm going to echo what Scott just said. Those 30% who shrug. Can they be moved one way or another, either to solidly back her, or can the attack ads from Walker move them in the other direction? So that's great. Okay, thanks so much. Thanks so much to Scott and Jason and Mary and JR and Bob, Capitol Roundtable, and we better get back to covering all these elections. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.